This week on the video version of the Business of Tech, market data for IoT, endpoints, and cloud, what's short-term and what's long-term, the future of work, proximity bias, contractors, and the 17.9% you care about, the dynamics of IT decision makers, another batch of laws coming for technology, the truce we care about, Windows 11 details and the actions you can take now to prepare, cyber insurance really is about to change, and coverage of the latest security stories. All this and more. Hit those like and subscribe buttons, and let's dive into the stories. With all the talk of the creativity in the office or an office-centric culture, is it true? Seems there's little data to support it. Open concept offices can even have a negative impact. Those open floor plans designed to create interactions actually had 70% fewer face-to-face interactions. Have you considered the proximity bias problem? That's the idea that employees with close physical proximity to their team and company leaders are perceived as better workers and end up with greater success. The biggest culprit? Hybrid workplaces, which breed inequality. There's data backing it up. Studies have shown physical proximity to the CEO generally leads to higher salaries, and other research shows lower performance evaluation and smaller raises for remote workers compared with being in the office. A potentially overlooked reason for remote work? Diversity and safety. I'm highlighting an editorial about how remote work is one part of a solution to ensuring inclusivity and safety in workplaces. And contractors, they may not be included at all in the plans to support workers. Reporting by The Verge is digging into how many companies are not outlining how contractors are affected nor answering specific questions. Some companies are using this as a hiring advantage. Facebook's head of recruiting is leaning into fully remote for anyone who wants it as a competitive hiring advantage. Microsoft offered 3 steps for meeting in hybrid. First, everyone on a laptop, even the ones in the room, with their webcams on and audio off. Second, make the easy in-room changes, having 2 screens, one for faces and one for slides, and a motion or speaker tracking camera. Finally, design the space so the screen and camera are at table height and ensure a good speaker setup. Hot desks are in demand. Pulling data from the Envoy Desks platform, desk bookings grew 95% from April to May 2021. Employees want to plan ahead. 45% of desks are reserved at least a day in advance. 12% of desks are booked further than 2 weeks out. Most desks are bookable. 90% of available desks are bookable. Only 10% of desks are permanently assigned. And in case you were wondering, yes, there are favorite desks. 43% of companies have at least one desk that accounts for 10% of total bookings. 46% of people reserve desks 1 day per week, and only 5% of people reserve desks 5 days a week. Maybe the answer is a third option. Axios is highlighting third workplace options as a growing trend. Places like hotels, restaurants, or hourly office space. As for that rush back to the office, when VMware opened back up, of the 5,000 employees in the Palo Alto office, only 99 showed up on that first day back. Now, why do we care? Interestingly, the easiest solution to solve the complexity is going 100% remote. Going entirely into the office for everyone is just a non-starter. Business leaders can easily imagine how that conversation would go. VMware's lesson is that you may declare you're open, but if no one shows up to your party, it's no party. Hybrid is really hard. Let's acknowledge it. You have to solve HR issues ranging from that proximity bias to every issue of in-office culture. It's going to come with technology investments too to make the tech work, and your office layout may not even be right for hybrid work. Not everyone can have that one cool desk that seems to be getting used. Some competitors are going to lean into that remote only as a differentiator too. The good news is that all this complexity exposes the opportunity. Helping customers with plans is of really high value. I'll reinforce that I think the sense of urgency is entirely self-imposed. If you and your customers are remote now, making money and hitting your goals, you can make that change to whatever is next at whatever speed makes sense, which is always a smart play. Consumers are doing better than pre-pandemic, even as the stimulus wears off in the US. The savings rate, for example, is higher than at any point pre-pandemic. That's from new data released on Friday. IDC says global Chromebook sales are expected to grow 33.5% to 43.4 million units in 2021. The analyst added that the global tablet market is also expected to grow 1.8%, and then noted that these market increases will not outlive the pandemic. IoT spending is on the rise. The latest IoT analytics update on the enterprise market shows spending grew 12.1% in 2020, with an expected increase up to 24% in 2021. In the cloud market, Gartner says AWS is still the largest public cloud provider with 40.8% of the market. Microsoft is at 19.7% and Alibaba at 9.5%. Overall, the market grew 40.7%. End user spending in the public cloud is expected to grow 23.1% this year, with SaaS driving the bulk and infrastructure as a service nipping at its heels. That cloud migration, however, not entirely getting to goal. PwC released a report on the cloud value gap, which is indicating only about half are reaching their cloud goals. It's across multiple reasons too, like delivering value or improving decision-making. A small group trying to be disruptive were much happier with their progress. Now, why do we care? It's a sugar high to think the PC, tablet, and Chromebook markets are long-term hot, but sugar does taste good. Markets like cloud and IoT are much better long-term, but make sure customers hit their goals when they spend. Simple enough, right? Well, if it was that simple, everyone would be doing it. Walk and chew gum at the same time. Pick up the gains from infrastructure investments while ensuring focus on business outcomes with technology investments. Not actually improving decision-making when selling based on that idea, the promise of digital transformation, after all, is far more perilous than missing out on a short-term bump. Microsoft was hit again by the Nobelium hackers, the same group who hit SolarWinds, having gotten in through a customer service agent's machine. The hackers used the access for specific, highly targeted attacks on specific Microsoft customers. The company has also confirmed that they did sign a malicious driver being distributed in gaming environments. Called NetFilter, it's a rootkit rather than a driver. The company was also hit by a dependency hijacking attack, but this one by an ethical hacker. Also on the target list, NFC readers used in many modern ATMs and point-of-sale systems. Easy to execute, the attacks allow crashes, locking down in a ransomware attack, and even loss of credit card data to the hacker. In case you missed it, Western Digital MyBook Live devices were mass deleted by hackers last week. Their firmware hadn't gotten an update since 2015. It's also been revealed that Denmark's central bank was exposed in the SolarWinds hack, leaving a backdoor to its network open for 7 months. Google has released a vulnerability interchange scheme for describing vulnerabilities across open source ecosystems. Designed to help with information sharing, it's built on top of their work on the open source vulnerabilities database. Cybersecurity literacy is being discussed in Congress. A bipartisan group has introduced legislation to establish a public awareness campaign. That's likely money well spent. In a survey of 2,000 professionals last month, almost 25% of them had not heard about the ransomware attack on Colonial Pipeline. The Department of Energy has asked Congress for enhancements to its own cybersecurity to the tune of $201 million. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has vowed a U.S. response if Moscow targets the U.S. with a cyber attack in an interview with an Italian newspaper. McAfee's threat report shows a shift from mass-spread ransomware attacks to more customized ransomware-as-a-service attacks, specifically against larger, more lucrative organizations. Verizon's research adds some additional color. 85% of breaches involve a human element, and 80% are discovered by a third party. Small companies are catching up to their bigger companions. While last year small companies were less than half of the breaches of larger ones, now it's reaching parity. The good news is that bug bounties are also up. GitHub paid out $1.5 million in 2020 as its biggest year yet. The criminals are reorganizing too. Since the ban of ransomware topics on 2 Russian cyber crime forums, some operators are shifting to new recruitment tactics, including new websites and marketing claims. Others are operating via referral networking to grow, per reporting by Bleeping Computer. As for cyber insurance, there's research saying it may be making things worse. In a paper from the defense think tank Royal United Services Institute, paying ransoms not only encourages more cyber criminals and more attacks, funding them to continue operations, but also is an existential threat for the insurers. Quote, to date, cyber insurance has failed to live up to expectations that it may act as a tool for improving organizations' cybersecurity practices, Rusi said, and they warned cyber insurers may be unintentionally facilitating the behavior of cyber criminals by contributing to the growth of targeted ransomware operations. The paper suggests that insurance should require minimum ransomware controls as part of any ransomware coverage. So why do we care? Connect something to the internet, it's going to be exposed. Savvy providers are going to be tracking the install dates of devices, as well as working with customers for lifecycle management. Now to the bigger issue. The insurance industry is wising up fast to their struggles and are going to be imposing much tighter control in the not-too-distant future. Their minimum ransomware controls are going to be imposed on IT services companies unless those companies are advocating for themselves. And don't wait on the security vendors to do it, because their motivation will be to get their product included, not focused on the people problem. String those stats together. People are 85% of breaches, and 25% didn't even know of Colonial Pipeline. You wonder why customers don't purchase products. This isn't strictly a product problem. Air cover in the form of literacy from the government should help greatly here. Don't think using the same words again will do it. The message isn't working, so change it. As we learned last week from Microsoft, changing the wording to eliminate passwords caused a culture shift over multi-factor authentication versus advocating for policy. As conditions on the ground continue to change and worsen, I'd expect your approach to do the same too. A flurry of bills moving through the system now, including multiple around big tech. A new one around taxing those companies to support broadband in rural areas, libraries, and hospitals is getting Republican support too. On top of that, 6 bills in total were approved out of committee, covering a package of tech-related issues. They're headed to the House floor for a vote. One of those was a vote to require big tech platforms to choose between running a platform and competing on it, wrapping up 2 days of votes that saw the approval of 4 measures directly aimed at reining in the power of some of the most powerful companies. How about the internet sex trafficking law FOSTA SESTA? Turns out it's almost never used. The mandated report 3 years in shows just one case. This law is a specific carve-out over Section 230, the internet speech law under constant scrutiny. Legislation that paves the way for a reciprocal cross-border data access regime between Australia and the United States has passed the Australian Federal Parliament despite lingering privacy concerns. In the UK, new guidance from the government on social media and private messaging, which includes a suggestion that those messaging services should prevent the use of end-to-end encryption on child accounts. The UK has also proposed the Online Safety Bill, which is designed to protect users from harmful content and would modify a code of practice to ensure it reflects government policy. Critics say those powers would undermine the regulatory independence, as the Culture Secretary is a political appointee. And in the midst of all this legal action, Microsoft and Google have ended their truce, where they had previously agreed not to use their lobbying efforts against each other. That agreement lapsed in April and does not appear to be scheduled for renewal. Now, why do we care? The big picture here is that technology legislation is changing fast, and I keep harping on the fact that it is now a role within an IT services company. You'd better be tracking the ones that matter to you. There's probably a lot here that listeners are upset about. Overreach on laws? Underreach? Too many? Not enough? The reason I'm talking about all this is because I find colleagues focused on IT services are not talking about it enough, if at all. Microsoft and Google have armies of lobbyists and are clearly gearing up. Who speaks for you? And what are you doing about that? Windows 11 was announced last week, and there's been a rapid fire of news to follow up. The hardware compatibility list is out, and many are finding it's tighter than expected. Full list in the show notes. Of course, that list might be changing, for as soon as it came out, Microsoft indicated it's reviewing those minimum requirements again. Watch this space, as this doesn't feel over. Also of note, Android app sideloading will be possible in Windows 11. Notably, Internet Explorer is removed entirely in Windows 11. The first preview build was released this week, and Microsoft has released best practices for planning its rollout. 11 is based on 10's codebase, so applications will be natively compatible. Microsoft wants organizations to join the Windows Insider program to review Windows 11. They should validate hardware and software compatibility with Windows 11 and create a deployment plan. Lastly, Microsoft touted Microsoft Endpoint Manager, which can be used to leverage cloud-based endpoint management capabilities with Windows 11. And a link to remote work. In a broad-ranging interview with The Verge, Satya Nadella revealed insights learned during the pandemic and added into Windows 11, including the fact that the CEO of Microsoft had never had a home office. Office is getting a 64-bit native ARM version 2, as we cover the Microsoft beat. It's also getting a redesign similar to the user interface on Windows 11. Now, why do we care? Of course, Microsoft is reviewing the chip requirements. They want to push an upgrade cycle, which is really hard to do in a chip shortage. That reality likely smacked them in the face with the announcement of the compatibility list. Anyone else feel like many of the changes are because Microsoft execs use their products at home? Just saying. I want to highlight some data coming out of the U.S. government's Digital Analytics Program. It's a data set of visitors to U.S. government websites and the operating systems they use. While 90% of those visitors are Windows 10, they're still a lot older, including a very small sliver still using technology like XP, NT, Vista, and all the way back to Windows 3.1. Sure, that last one was only 15 users, but there are still several thousand users using Windows 95, 98, and ME. There's still 6% using Windows 7. So there's an obvious bit of work to be done here in upgrades, which is clearly a sales opportunity. Even if you're not doing the rollouts, there's consulting here. I continue to observe it's a sugar high too, but that doesn't mean it's not real. Want to ask, why do we care? T-shirts, stickers, water bottles, and even aprons. Pick up some of our great stuff at the link in the description below and support the show directly. Consumer spending in mobile apps hit a record $64.9 billion during the first half of 2021, according to preliminary data from App Store intelligence firm Sensor Tower. This figure represents a 24.8% increase in spending seen across both the App Store and Google Play compared with the year-ago period. From the first half of 2019 to the first half of 2020, consumer spending on mobile apps grew 28.4% from $40.5 billion to $52 billion. For comparison, slower than the 24.8% seen in the current period. Just 4 in 10 IT decision makers trust their business counterparts to make informed technology buying decisions, according to a survey from Spiceworks Ziff Davis released June 15th. The firm surveyed 300 IT and 200 business decision makers. But 58% of business decision makers perceive themselves as sufficiently informed to purchase technology, the survey found. IT decision makers are part of 88% of cloud purchases, according to the report. On average, 6 to 8 key stakeholders are involved in making cloud purchasing decisions. Following a 7% year-over-year contraction in 2020, server spending will make a comeback in 2021 and grow by 3%, according to a Forrester report released Friday. The firm projects server spend growth will hold steady in 2022. Spending on licensed software for on-premises deployments will also recover from the cutbacks or delays of 2020. Forrester projects license fees will grow 1% this year, but will see a 1% decline in 2022. The on-premise bounce back aligns with Forrester predictions on U.S. tech budgets. Tech spending is set to grow by 7.4% in 2021 and 6.7% in 2022, up from the previous forecast of 6% in 2021 and 6.5% in 2022. Now, why do we care? E-commerce spending in apps is up, showing the continued change in the digital marketplace. IT decision makers don't trust their business counterparts. Now, why do we care? E-commerce spending in apps are up, showing the continued change in the digital marketplace. IT decision makers don't trust their business counterparts, who are increasingly empowered without them. Delayed projects in 2022 will get their bump into 2021, but I predict that leveling will continue the descent previously going on. And we care because that's the landscape to deliver services in. New survey from Indeed about job seekers. Only about 10% are actively and urgently looking for work. 45% are passively looking. Most open jobs are in low-wage sectors, and when asked, here's why workers aren't coming back. About 25% are afraid of COVID-19 and are waiting for vaccination rates to climb before getting back to work. More than 20% say they have a financial cushion, and about 12% say their unemployment insurance is the reason they're not rushing to get a job. Childcare is also a major factor, with 20% of lower-wage workers saying they're staying home due to care responsibilities. Apple is not changing their stance on hybrid work, it seems, despite pushes from employees, and the company has indicated their stated plans for hybrid work are going to stand. Google, meanwhile, is restarting bus networks around its Mountain View headquarters as other large firms like Adobe and Facebook move slower. In that context, there's data from Gartner about returning to work. 48% of large global organizations aren't tracking the vaccination status of employees, and only 8% are requiring proof of vaccination before employees come back to the office. 36% of organizations plan to have employees self-report vaccination status, but won't require proof. 9% of organizations will let employees work remotely on certain days, and 32% will let employees work remote all of the time. Wondering why we spend time here? Gartner's data says the future of work spending will increase 17.4% on last year. The Washington Post digs into workers' burnout. That's a recurring theme. Gallup polls have found that workers' life evaluations have declined during the pandemic, regardless of remote or in-person work, and that 61% of women and 52% of men feel stressed on a typical day, both up from before the pandemic. Different companies are experimenting with time off and additional benefits, and some companies are experimenting with the 4-day work week. And the collisions of law and work. Colorado's Equal Pay for Equal Work Act is a set of laws designed to end wage discrimination. Some companies are now excluding Colorado-based remote employees in job listings to avoid disclosing salary ranges and benefits as required by the law. It's a law that may be backfiring. Now, why do we care? There's debate about if this is a turning point for American workers. Some are skeptical. Schools reopening will matter for that portion of the workforce. Workers have a lot of power right now. How long they will have it is the open question. My take is that most analysts are underestimating the impact of emotion on these decisions. That burnout and stress data is the indicator. Are people working to live or living to work? And now they're questioning their decisions. Times of great trauma are known for that. My prediction is that a lot of these plans by employers to go back will be derailed by employees who quietly say, no thank you. Dutch cybersecurity firm Tesserayan has released a free decryptor for the Lorenz ransomware, allowing victims to recover some of their files for free without paying a ransom. An international law enforcement operation has seized the servers, data, and customer logs for Double VPN, a double encryption service commonly used by threat actors to evade detection while performing malicious activities. Double VPN is a Russian-based VPN service that double, triple, and even quadruple encrypts data sent through their service. The golden age of criminal VPNs is over, said Europol's Crime Center's head. The NSA has warned that Russian nation-state hackers are conducting brute force attacks to access U.S. networks and using a Kubernetes cluster to do it. Microsoft has warned about 3 bugs in some Netgear routers which are being used as a stepping stone into networks. A report from Avanan shows that customers in IT, healthcare, and manufacturing are the top targets for phishing emails. Why? The large amounts of personal data they collect, and they are often using outdated technology that can be easily hacked. The average paid loss for a closed standalone cyber claim jumped to $358,000 in 2020 from $145,000 in 2019, according to a recent report by Fitch Ratings. A key metric for the profitability of a line of insurance, the statutory direct loss plus defense and cost containment ratio, also skyrocketed last year to 73%, which compares with an average of 42% for the previous 5 years for cyber insurance, the report found. More data supporting changes due to come to cyber insurance. We have a price tag for the SolarWinds attack, an average of $12 million per affected company. 70% of companies in the survey by IronNet felt some impact from the attack too. CISA has released their ransomware readiness assessment, which is a step-by-step process for evaluating cybersecurity practices on networks. It's available right on GitHub. MITRE has also released Defend, which is their cybersecurity countermeasures framework. And that Western Digital Drive issue? Sadly, it seems there's another one. A second exploit also allows for a full wipe of the device. Now, why do we care? While the incident list is relentless, there are positive notes in here. That pressure for change from insurance companies will build, but the creation of tools, frameworks, and assessments feels like it's increasing. I'll mark that as a positive, particularly with increased law enforcement attention, or even the perception of it. In the UK, the right to repair law has taken effect as of yesterday. It applies to so-called white goods, including refrigerators, washing machines, and televisions. Spare parts must be available to consumers under the law. The goal is to expand the lifetime of appliances by up to 10 years. Why do we care? We care simply because these laws are happening. Europe tends to lead lately with regulation, but with the world so connected, the impacts are felt more globally. This is consumer products, but it's tech adjacent and feels like a data point on the regulation trend. I've had this one all week I wanted to get to. Instagram is rolling out a desktop version. I want to quote from their release. We haven't found any evidence that the Instagram desktop web experience cannibalizes engagement from the native apps, a data scientist with Instagram observed with the launch of web messaging. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Users who use both interfaces spend more time on each interface compared to users who use each interface exclusively. Now, why do we care? This may seem very consumer, but I want to point to a broader point. When digital events first started, organizers believed it might cannibalize physical attendance. It didn't. Product designers are also finding, like Instagram, that being on multiple platforms is good, not bad. Thus, the argument for anything e-commerce enabled. Offering your service any way the customer wants to consume it is the trick. And the big thought going into the weekend. Are you able to have your services acquired any way the customer might want? Thanks for tuning in to This Week in the Business of Tech. Shows come out each week, pulling together the daily podcast. If you like this show, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. The content here is possible because of supporters like you. If you want access to shows early, answers to your questions, and private interactions, join our Patreon. It's pay what you want. You decide what the content is worth. Join at patreon.com/MSPradio. Patreons also get access to the written versions of every story as they come out. If you want the stories right away, you can get them on the daily podcast. Find The Business of Tech on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your shows. Subscribe links at businessof.tech, and I'll talk to you again next week.